In today's tutorial, we're going to create the Creazioni Boxy bag. This particular pattern includes options for 3 sizes, and all sizes use the same techniques that result in no binding, no raw edges, and no unsightly seams. Each size has its own features, however. The little mini size includes an optional lobster clasp because it's the perfect size to connect to your backpack, diaper bag, duffel bag, sports bag, tote bag, or whatever. The mid and large sizes include optional carry handles, and the large size incorporates a more structured interfacing. We are going to create this mid-size bag today, and if you haven't already got the pattern, you can grab it in the description below because we're going to start with step 2. You should have already done your prep work today. So let's dive in and take a look at the materials and supplies that we have prepped for our project today. One of the fun things about this pattern is that you're going to learn a couple of techniques that aren't very common in bag making, including how to create a French seam. The bag is constructed primarily from quilt cotton, and I've got the cotton fabric all cut and prepped today with interfacing, the exterior panels, the lining panels, the fabric for our little handle, as well as our strap loops. We also are going to use a zipper in our project, and when selecting your thread, keep in mind that there'll be a fair amount of top stitching on this exterior fabric, so pick a color that you want to use with some top stitching there. We are also, for one of our techniques, going to use some hemming tape today. For that, you'll need a steam iron and an ironing mat, and we'll be using regular iron also throughout the process of construction. I like to use a little bit of fabric glue throughout the process, so I have that handy, and then a quilting ruler and a fabric pen for our boxes that we're going to make in the bag. Other than that, you'll just need your standard sewing implements, your fabric scissors, a machine, and whatever you like to use when you sew. So now that we have everything assembled, and without further ado, let's get sewing. We're going to start by installing this zipper. For zipper installation, we'll need our lining and our exterior panels handy, plus our zipper. I'm going to use some sewing clips, and I'm going to have my iron on the ready so that I can do some pressing in a few minutes. Got one exterior panel right side up, and I've got the pattern laying the way I want it to lay in my final product. I'm going to take this zipper and put it right side down and line it up with this top edge of the panel. I like to have my zipper pull off and out of the way so that I don't have to worry about it. If you've got a shorter zipper, you may have to just move that zipper pull out of the way while you sew. But I like to use a little bit longer zipper so that I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to clip this zipper to my exterior panel and take it to my machine and baste stitch 1/8 inch seam allowance along this edge. With this basted in place, now I'm going to take one lining panel and I am going to place it right side down on top of the wrong side of that zipper, line up my sides, and you'll notice that I'm using this part that has the more narrow 1/4 inch space between the interfacing and the edge of the fabric. I'm going to leave a larger margin of interfacing down here at the bottom, and you'll see why later. I'm going to clip this in place and go back to my machine and sew with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. My preference whenever sewing over a zipper is to lay the zipper so that the zipper teeth are facing up. And I do that regardless of which panel I am sewing. Okay, we've got one side of our zipper attached, and I am going to turn these panels wrong sides together and smooth out our seam up here, and then press it in place from both sides, being careful not to hit those zipper teeth with my hot iron. Now I'm going to top stitch along the top of these panels with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to install the second set of panels in the same way. I'm going to lay our second exterior panel right side up with the pattern the way I'd like it. I'm going to lay that zipper with the other panels attached right on top of that, right side down. This time my zipper pull will be on the opposite end. I'm going to line up the tops of the panel and the zipper, as well as the sides of our panels, and then clip in place and take to the sewing machine and baste this in place. Then I'm going to put our lining panel on top, right sides down, and sew that in place exactly like we did before. Okay, the main body is coming together. I am going to set this aside, and we're going to work on our strap loops and our handle. Fold in the long edges towards center, using our interfacing as a guide. Press that in place and fold a second time, lining up these edges where our first folds are. Press that really well. I'm going to set that aside because it's ready to top stitch. And do the same exact process for our strap loops. Okay, now I'll take all 3 of these to the machine, and I want to top stitch along the long edges. For these little ones, I'm just going to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch, but for our handle, I'll do a 1/4 or a scant 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to put the handle aside. We'll use that later. But right now we're going to need our main body and our 2 little strap loops. And for this next step, I'm going to attach our strap loops. I'm going to use a little bit of Fabri-Tac glue and some clips. And I want to make sure our bag is open. But I'm going to push these zipper teeth together at the opened end. Then I'm going to use a little bit of glue. Folding that in, and then stick some glue on that edge. And take a couple of clips and clip this in place. This is going to go immediately over the zipper, and it's going to hang over just very slightly. I'll repeat the process. Okay, now I'm ready to take this to the machine, and I'm just going to sew back and forth along this edge of the zipper, and we're going to secure our little strap loops. With our strap loops attached, it is time to pull the exterior panels together and our lining panels together. I am going to line up this long edge here and clip it in place. And I'm going to do the same with the lining. We are going to stitch both of these ends up. But with the lining, I want to leave an opening because we'll turn our bag through this lining later in the process. For exterior panels, I'm going to sew up this seam at a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way across. But for the lining, I'm only going to sew the ends up to the marks that I made. We're leaving a 6-inch opening because we're going to turn the entire bag through that 6-inch opening later in the process. I'll back stitch really well at the marks I made and skip over this midsection. I'm going to use my interfacing as a guide. So this seam allowance will be slightly larger than our exterior seam allowance, and that will help our lining to lay properly inside our bag. The bottoms are sewn up in both the lining and the exterior panel. One step I forgot before I did this, and it really doesn't matter when we do this, but I need to snip off my zipper ends. I'm using an old scissor for that because I don't like to use my good fabric scissors to go over zipper teeth. With our bottoms sewn up and our zipper trimmed, we are ready to press our seam allowances. And I'm going to press the bottom seam allowance of the exterior panel open. For our interior, I'm actually going to press this to one side instead of pressing it open, and you'll see why later. Okay, and with that, I'm going to reorient. I'm going to start with the exterior panels, and I am going to line up our seam that we just made, the bottom of our panels. I'm going to line that up with the center of the zipper. So you can see where this seam and the center of the zipper are going to line up. And I'm going to clip this in place, but because this particular junction is really important, it's going to show in the final bag and look funny if it's crooked. And sometimes things shift when you put them in the machine or before they even get into the machine. I'm not going to take any chances. I'm going to put a little bit of glue before I clip it in place. And we do the same thing with the exterior panel on the other end. Lining up that seam with the center of the zipper. And now that that's glued and clipped, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my lining. I'm going to line up the seam with the center of the zipper, use the same clip to clip that in place as well. I'm not going to worry about glue for this one because it's not as critical. At this stage, I'm just going to make sure that these folds don't have any fabric bunched up in them. And I'm going to clip these side seams. This is how your bag should look. I'm going to clip along these side seams and I'm going to take them to the machine and sew a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance down both sides. We are getting so close. We've got our bag sewn up, and now I'm going to trim these corners close to my stitches and at an angle. And now we are ready to turn this bag lining side out. I'm going to open up that hole we left in the lining and turn it all the way through. Okay, I've got the entire bag lining side out. And I've opened up the zipper so that I could push out my corners in there as well. And you may want to use a turning tool or the blunt end of a paintbrush, a chopstick, whatever tool you like to push out your corners. I find my fingernails do a fine job. But with that done, we are ready to close up this hole. And to do so, I've got my steam iron ready. It's going to make some noise when I turn on the steam. And I have a 6-inch piece of hemming tape to go with our 6-inch hole. This is why we pressed our seam to the side, because we have a nice surface here to lay down our stitch witchery or hemming tape. And I'm following manufacturer's instructions for this. Your hemming tape may be different, but for my stitch witchery, I'm going to lay it in place. And then I'm going to use the steam from the steam iron and just hold it on top of it, not touch the stitch witchery, but just hold it close so that I'm sort of steaming it in place. Once that's all steamed in there, I will lay this top fabric down on top of the hemming tape and press it in place. And I find that hemming tape works really well to close these birthing holes as long as you're careful to follow manufacturer's instructions. It makes a good secure seam. Okay, you want to take really care, because sometimes after you've got that all sealed, with all that steam, the heat will go through and make your zipper pull a little bit hot. And you don't want to burn yourself on that. So just take care and let it cool down. And once it is all cooled down, we are going to turn the bag right side out. Okay, once again, I've taken care to poke those corners out really well. I am going to make sure they're all smooth and the fabric inside is smoothed out, and I'm going to give them a quick press again. I've swapped my iron back out because that steam iron is just too noisy. Okay, now we're ready to start the fun part. What we've got here is a flat pouch, and we are going to box it. And to do that, we're going to look at the side seam here, and I'm going to use my fingers to smooth out a V where the side seam is centered down the middle, and all our layers of fabric are laying smooth on either side. I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to measure exactly 1 inch from the tip of our V to the bottom here of our ruler. I'm going to make sure it's straight by ensuring that our sides on either side also hit the 1 inch mark. And once that is straight, we'll pull our fabric marker out and draw a line. I want to make sure my line shows up really well. And then I'm going to clip that in place so my fabric doesn't bunch up or move. I'm going to repeat that process for all 4 corners. Use my fingers in there to smooth out the fabric. Center my side seam. Use my ruler to mark 1 inch. Make sure it is straight. And then draw my line. And now that I've marked all 4 corners and I've measured carefully, I'm going to take this to the machine and sew along the lines that I've drawn. I'm going to sew all the way from end to end, back stitching really well at each end. Okay, look how fun this is starting to look. I am now going to trim these corners off close to my stitching. This will be trimmed down to about 1/16 of an inch. And just so that we're not panicking, that we're cutting into the right side of our bag here, we are then going to turn the bag lining side out and enclose those seams in a French seam. With our corners all snipped off, we are ready to attach our handle, and I am going to do that on the edge where the zipper pull lays when it is closed. So I want to attach my handle over here, and I'm going to attach it just on the bottom edge of this side seam. I'm going to figure out how I want this to lay, and then I am going to sew it in place just like so. I'm going to have it flush with these edges, and I'm going to use a little glue to hold that in place. With the handle glued and clipped, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and stitch up both sides of the handle. I'm going to try to follow the stitches I made earlier to stitch our boxes, or I'll stitch just within that seam allowance that we trimmed. Okay, with our handle sewn on, we're ready to turn this back lining side out. Okay, I am now going to smooth out the fabric inside of each box and press it so that everything's nice and smooth in there. Okay, now I'm going to stitch up each of our box edges with a 1/4 inch seam allowance straight across. That's going to enclose those raw edges on the exterior of the bag, making a French seam, and it's going to look really, really beautiful. Now I could change out my thread if I wanted to match the lining, but these corners are going to be really hard to see, and nobody will ever notice if I change that thread out or not. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to take it to the machine and sew up these box corners. Okay, the French seams are all sewn up, and I'm going to turn this bag right side out, and we're going to have the reveal. And how does it look? Our boxy bag is finished. And check out that seam inside and the lining. That lining lays nicely and that seam looks great. Peek in there at our French seams, and they look great. And I proclaim this boxy bag gift worthy and complete. Just to put a bug in your ear, if you would like to watch a tutorial for the mini boxy bag, I've got one on my channel in my free Scrap Buster playlist. I'll go ahead and link that in the description below as well. And that concludes our Creazioni Boxy Bag tutorial. If you have any questions or suggestions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. If you appreciate this content, please like and subscribe. And as always, happy sewing!